wrestling fans across the country and around the world. It's time once again for CNWA Pro Wrestling from the Second Row podcast. Join your host, T James Logan, as he talks with the stars of CNWA Pro Wrestling. Let's join T James right now with this week's special guests.
Hey fans, welcome to another special edition of From the Second Row. I'm your host, the Legend T James Logan, and I'm sitting here with a guy who definitely deserves more of a name legend than me, former WWF, old day style.
Yes.
Phil Lafon. Phil, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Happy to be part of it.
Well, Phil, you have been working a lot with Monster Pro Wrestling lately.
Yes. I've been working with Monster Pro Wrestling. Sean's a personal friend. We got together during the early 2001, 2002, so we got connected together and we did a lot of road trips together. So we formed a friendship that's even stronger as today. And I just support Sean's company. I think he's going on the right track. I just can't believe it that wrestling is still going on to this day. You know, I've seen it from the penthouse and all the way down to the outhouse, you know. I mean, that's what it is, you know, because UFC, you know, we in the 80s and the 90s were the UFC at the time, you know. I mean, we were the biggest drawing cards, and regardless on what country you went to, if it was in the States, Japan, Mexico, or even in Europe, it was still and now, you know, we know what wrestling is now, you know. I mean, when I was and I'm very grateful for my career. When I first started I believe it way back in 82, I started, there was 5 companies in Canada where you could make a living. That's all you did was wrestle. Now to this day, it's more of a hobby now, you know. There is nowhere you can make a living. So I've seen that transition over the years, and that's why when I see the young gentlemen like Sean is supporting, these guys still have passion for wrestling. I try to pass on as much knowledge as I can, you know, because it is a lost art, and I'm very fortunate to work with all the biggest companies in the world. I've been to Japan 56 tournaments, so, I had a really, really good run there. Got to be in the WWF. I got to be with all the big names, you know, and lived in Puerto Rico, Mexico, so I got to travel very young as a young man, and just like to pass the experience on to the young guys, which very well appreciated. The guys are very respectful. It's one of the reasons I'm here.
Well, what drew you in the beginning to wrestling? What made you want to become a professional wrestler?
Too lazy to work, too nervous to be a thief. Old saying, hey, you know, can't sing and dance, got to do something, right? No, I just, believe it or not, it was nothing in my intention. I was an athlete. I used to do tough man contests, and somehow, I was working at a Gold's Gym back in the 81 where Dynamite and Davey Boy, which I'm sure, God bless their souls, used to come by and all that. And at the time they were recruiting, wrestlers. And they asked me for a tryout, and I went for a tryout and, never looked back. I started from there and made it, and here I am to this day, you know, 30 years later.
Well, many of your fans remember you being a tag team specialist.
Yeah, that's right.
With Doug Furness, right?
Correct.
One of the things that always stuck out about you guys, even back at that time of the kind of like late 80s, was the fact you guys were a very strong team. You wrestled like a strong style, which a lot of wrestlers weren't doing at that time. Is that something you've always wanted to do? Like, you were very physical, a little bit hard-hitting more so than a lot of wrestlers were at that time.
Well, a lot of the people, North America would see us, when you go in Japan, it's still entertainment form, but however, they take it a little more serious. So it's a little bit more athletic over there. So it's, they hit harder, you know. They move harder. They're not so much on the showmanship. They're more into the actual wrestling. So we brought that style over there, and Doug was always like, he is one of the world's strongest men when he came on, you know, so very athletic. He was the power. I was more the technician, because even at 230 pounds, they called me a middle heavyweight. Now it's a super heavyweight. Yes. Right? At the time, I was always the smallest guy on the crew. We had a regular crew to go to Japan, and I was always at 230. I was always the smallest guy on the crew.
Wow.
So yeah, and Doug, he was the same height as me, but he was like 260 ripped, you know, phenomenal athlete. And he was the big power. He did all the power moves. I did the technician, but the combination together really gelled. Somehow they put us together. They called us the Can-Am Express. I think a knockoff of the Can-Am Connection. I think.
Yes, Martel and Zink.
Yeah, which both were my partners before in Montreal. They were Zink was my partner for 3 years, and Ricky, many tag team, good friends of mine. We just brought back a style that North America wasn't used at first, because it was mostly Japanese style what we did there, So that's how we got, I guess, that rep.
Well, one of the things I find remarkable, fans, and I've said this many times, is whenever people ask me who my top 5 favorite wrestlers were of all time, I always list Rick Martel in there, and people are like, the model? And I'm like, no, he wasn't always the model.
No.
That guy could wrestle, and I remember he was the AWA champion growing up, and that guy could really wrestle. And that's cool. You got to wrestle with him, too, and be his partner.
He was actually one of the owners of the International Wrestling with Dino Bravo, God bless his soul, too. And not only was Ricky Martel, and it's good that you notice his athletic ability as a wrestler, because he was a really good wrestler, but he also was a gentleman. He was, whatever he portrayed in the ring as a bad guy and all that, it was nothing like him. It was nothing like that, because he was a real gentleman. He was respectful. He was a great boss. If I ever met Ricky, ever see him in the street again, I have nothing but a hug for him, because he was a real gentleman, and I respect him every bit. Ricky Martel is a very good memory, and he helped me a lot too.
Well, I do see where they're letting the people in, so we probably should wrap it up for you. I just wanted to ask a quick question for you. You have seen the whole system of where there's been big companies. You've seen the territory system that fall apart. For the longest while, there's maybe been little independent companies, but now we're seeing the CNWA where 5 companies are coming together to make a circuit. What do you think of that? Do you think this will be a revitalization?
I totally encourage it. I think they're heading in the right direction. Like I was saying, Alberta by itself was a territory. It was called Stampede Wrestling. We used to make a great living here. And I like to see all these little territories, because it's one thing I like to see with all the young guys, because there is a lot of talent here. I do like to see them come back all together and help each other instead of go against each other. I know there's a couple of companies in Edmonton right now, they should be working together, but that's only my opinion. I really like it. I hope they keep working together. I encourage it, and I'm here more for support. It's Sean, he's my great friend, and he supports me, in a way that he lets me do anything I want. He has total respect, and I have the same for him, but I really like what Monster Pro Wrestling is doing, not only encouraging young men to be good wrestlers, but he also helps them as, to be good adults. He encourages them, he encourages them to go to the gym. There's more to life than drinking and partying in the weekend. So I totally support Monster Pro Wrestling, and him joining up with the others, 100% for it.
All right.
You can watch all of the CNWA Pro Wrestling action on www.centralalbertatv.net and rdtv.ca. Join our group on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at CNWA Wrestling. Visit our website at www.cnwawrestling.ca for all the latest news and upcoming events on CNWA Pro Wrestling.
Well, you know what? I'd love to have a sit down again with you sometime. I have actually a whole bunch of questions that I'd love to get out there sometime.
Well, you have a couple. If you want to go for it.
You want to do that? Sure.
Keep
okay.
Going. Not that much.
All right. Perfect. One of the questions I've always wondered about, because I read this, okay? This whole thing with your name start in the beginning. I've been very confused by the whole Dan Crawford story.
Oh, yeah.
What is that about?
Going back to Ricky Martel, and he'll tell you himself, the little bugger. That's the only thing. Well, when I worked for him in Montreal International, we all had, my name is Phil Lafon, so very French. Philippe, exactly, to be exact. So it was very French, and they didn't want too many French names on the card. They needed an English name, and not very little of the guys talked English. English is my second language, but I talked a lot better than most of them. So he asked me, "Did you have an English name you would like to use?" And at that time, I was 1 or 2 years in the business. I says, Rick, I don't care what you call me. Just, give me my paycheck. That's all I'm at. So he came up with that damn Crawford, and I didn't know who it was and all that. And I said, yeah, sure. I says, I used it. And 3 or 4 years down the road, I found out it was a famous wrestler in Stampede Wrestling.
Yeah, it's Stampede Wrestling.
It was all about Ricky changing my name. So if you ever meet him down the road, question him about that.
So another question I'm wondering about, where is Doug Furnace these days? I don't really know.
Yeah, that's it's an unfortunate thing. I haven't kept in touch with him over, maybe 5 years, last I heard he was in San Diego and he was helping out the youth. He was like a youth counselor and all that, which would fit in perfect with his personality. He was a good man in that decision, very good role model, never drank in his life, never did drugs, so excellent athlete. So I think the last I've heard him, he was helping out youth in San Diego, and that's it.
That's cool. One of the things I was wondering about is, like, as you see trends in wrestling over the years, you guys came in at a time with this Japanese style, which was really work-related but not flashy like all the character stuff. And did you feel kind of like a bit of a duck out of water being in WWE at the time where it was all these cartoon characters and then you two guys really wrestling and tearing it up? Did it make you feel a little bit out of place there?
Well, when we did sign our contract with Vince, I can remember that. I told Vince that that's one thing I've never been in, and maybe that's one of the reasons I took Japan over. I was never comfortable with being in front of interviews.
Right.
Because interviews is a total, pretty much an actor, and I wasn't really, believe it or not, I had big fears of public speaking. Public speaking is one of the biggest human nature fear, and I had that, and I was never good in that, and I told Vince McMahon, and he says, don't worry about it, because he says, just do your wrestling. And I was very comfortable with my wrestling because I don't care who was in there, a lot of the guys didn't like it at first, the Americans, because they didn't understand it. Yeah. But once they got into it, we introduced it to them. They liked it. But the transition to wrestling was okay. I never had, because I felt confident with that. But the interviews I never enjoyed. I even tell Sean to this day, I do them, and he says you're good at them and all that. I said I do, but I was never comfortable with them.
Well, one of the things I've always felt bad about was the fact that your guys' team, when I think of you guys, you really were like innovators of a style that was coming. You were bringing it forward, but you never got the credit due because you guys weren't the flashy guys in the beginning. Yeah. So I always thought that was a little tragic that you guys didn't get as much as a push as you should have, because you guys were the forerunners of the teams that came later now that are recognized as the flashy, hard wrestlers. So I just wanted to say thank you for that contribution, which I really think is legitimate in wrestling.
Yeah.
And I want to say, I saw you wrestle a couple months ago in Red Deer, and it was the first time I'd seen you wrestle in years and years, and I was actually blown away. You were really exciting and fun. You still have it in you, brother.
Not bad for 50 years old, eh? I'm just happy to be alive.
So what can we expect in any kind of future in wrestling for Phil Lafon?
Right now, like Sean's a close friend of mine, and I support what he does. I says, as long as I'm having fun, it gives me, I'm a full-time student. I'm going in for social work, I says, as long as I'm having fun and it's, a social function for me too, and it's a good motivation to keep on training, so as long as it's fun for me and it motivates me, I think I would like to, because right now I think it's a lost art, it's a shame, but I like to, that's why I train every Thursday. I try to pass down what I've learned of all the territories I must have worked. I was very fortunate to work over 20, 25 territories. Every territory in the world I got to work in when they were all big ones, eh? Made lots of money doing it too, So I just would like to pass it on to the younger generation, because I see there's still a passion for it, which is amazing for it. And it just shows you in the world that people want to be entertained, and this is what we are. We're entertainers,
All right. Well, I can only think of two last questions. And the first question, if people want to train and learn from Phil Lafon and get in on, where do they go for wrestling learning here?
Go through Sean, Monster Pro Wrestling on his website. Yeah, he's the boss. I'm just the coach. Always go through Sean. Yep. Sean, the Monster Pro Wrestling.
And that'd be on Facebook. They can look at Monster Pro Wrestling.
Yes.
Okay, and the second question, did you ever have to meet Dan Crawford and explain the whole name thing to him?
Yeah, actually I did. It was in Stampede Wrestling, and he goes, he came up to me, and I was still cocky at the time. He came up to me and goes, "Oh, you can use my name and all that." I thought to him, I don't need your name to be over. I just thought at that time, but I was cocky. But I understood. I told him, I says, and I found out that Ricky Martel was one of his best friends. And Ricky Martel looked up to Dan Crawford, and that's why he gave me that name, because it was not out of disrespect; it was more out of respect. So, it was funny, and Sean went down to Las Vegas, the Cauliflower Hour Club, and he explained that again. Ricky Martel, Dan Crawford, and Sean. You ever talk to him, ask him about that story. And,
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, Phil, we had a great time sitting here talking with you, and we look forward to talking to you again sometime soon. And fans in Alberta who want to come down and see guys at Monster Pros, now part of CNWA, new territory springing up, lots of shows going around, and lots of fun wrestling. So it was a pleasure talking to you, sir, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Pleasure, and thank you for supporting pro wrestling. Thank you too. Thank you for supporting pro wrestling. I mean, it's a great place to bring the kids and have a 2-hour good time a night, and hope to see you down the road.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Join us next time for CNWA Pro Wrestling from the Second Row podcast with T James Logan. And watch for CNWA Pro Wrestling action coming to a town near you. The CNWA Pro Wrestling from the Second Row podcast is hosted by T James Logan. Produced and edited by Thomas Little. Assistant producer and audio engineer is Karen Little. CNWA from the Second Row podcast is produced in conjunction with CNWA Pro Wrestling and is copyrighted and may not be used in whole or in part without express written permission